What's the worst, best thing you've ever seen happen at a wedding? My buddy married a woman who was estranged from most of her family save her 90-plus-year-old grandpa. They were so close and he was in poor health that the wedding was held in Grandpa's backyard so he could be there. 36 hours before the wedding he had a massive heart attack and was rushed to the ER. They were recommending hospice, palliative care, and bride-to-be was going to call off the wedding. Grandpa insisted it go on even with him not being at his own house because people were flying from all over the country. All during intermittent bouts of consciousness. Fast forward to the wedding and this determined granddad broke out of the hospital. Just unhooked all his equipment/for stuff and took a cab to his own house hours before the wedding. The family that was invited was incredibly upset but knew how close he was to the bride and he ended up staying through the whole ceremony without issue. Slept in his bed and then returned to the hospital the next day. Think he also drank a few beers. Absolute legend of a man. My ex-husband and I were at his cousin's wedding. Another cousin of his, 25/M, was a groomsman. He was a giant guy, 6'4", roughly 400 pounds, and the life of the party. Picking kids up and throwing them in the air, holding the groom on his shoulders, dancing like a maniac. Having a blast. I went to the bathroom and came back to the reception to the music cut and everyone circled around the dance floor just panicked. There was Matt. Completely purplish red and on the floor while a guest performed CPR and others were calling 911, taking his pulse, screaming. He passed away from a massive heart attack. Pronounced dead on the scene. The reception ended right then and there, obviously. The bride and groom were supposed to leave for their honeymoon to Hawaii that same evening. They ended up not going and instead they stayed home to attend the funeral where the groom was a pallbearer. The minister was doing their speech during the ceremony and asked, rhetorically, "What is love?" "Baby don't hurt me" was muttered by several groomsmen, who all started cracking up. When my uncle got married the best man dropped the ring. In the dead silence of the church you could hear it ting-ting-ting as it bounced along the floor, followed by one of the groomsmen stage whispering Jesus Christ loud enough for everyone to hear. The pastor didn't even bat an eye, just said, "The ring has already been blessed, thank you," and carried on. I walked by an outdoor wedding in which the bride walked into man-eater and the groom walked into gold digger. Either the whole family has a great sense of humor or the marriage is doomed. My best friend's biological father, who took off when she was very young, threw a fit and made everyone from his family leave, because my best friend did her father/daughter dance with her stepdad, who has raised her in her father's absence. They rented a huge manor. Music? Not a problem. Spotify. Premium you ask? Nope. With the commercials. Watching the groom and his best man ride the bathtub that was used for the beer down a hill and not die. It was a hill for loading boats into a river. It was like a 150-foot ride and they got going scary fast. The bath broke into pieces but all 5 of the men were fine. Somehow. Edit. Wow, this blew up, thanks you all. I was at a wedding where the family had a tradition that between the wedding and the reception, the couple would take a 15-minute break to share a large bowl of chicken soup. They ate at a table in the middle of the courtyard and no one was allowed to come near. Not only does it prevent the starving bride problem, but it emphasizes that they are accountable only to each other. There was a couple who had been best friends forever like ... many years. They never put the boyfriend, girlfriend label on anything, but they were both in the military, lived together, and were an item long before they introduced each other as girlfriend and boyfriend. By the time they started dating they only really dated for about a year before they got married, even though they'd effectively been together for over a decade. Their families knew each other, everyone who knew them knew they were going to eventually get married. It wasn't weird if you knew them. During their wedding, they were brought to the dance floor to play some kind of newlywed game while the DJ, who didn't know them, emceed the event. He asked how long they dated, to which they said just under a year. The DJ goes on this rant about how he can't believe people that only know each other for a short period of time and get married. He unironically asked them if they understood that they were getting married and that he seriously doubted that they'd known each other for long enough to make that kind of commitment. At my wedding, the registrar said the best man's name instead of mine during the I do's, and my wife was too busy staring at me to notice. My mate with pure class started to stand up and walk up to take my place. I gave him the evil monkey stare and the whole room was laughing pretty hard. The registrar's face was bright red and she apologized for it. Lol. A guest let their children play in the kitchen a couple hours before the wedding despite repeatedly being told not to let their children in there. Among other things, apparently they'd been misbehaving a lot. The kids destroyed the wedding cake. I believe they were related to the bride somehow and that's why they were there so early. At my wedding, the maid of honor gave a 15-minute speech that did nothing but reference her breakup, and then me and my wife's prior relationships in gruesome detail. Longest 15 minutes of my life. We're no longer married. My cousin had her wedding at a zoo because she was a vet tech and her first date was at a zoo as well as her engagement, so it just made sense. I was a bridesmaid, so we got to get especially up close to the animals. The giraffes kept trying to eat the bouquets during the pictures, and they were non-toxic, so it was mostly just funny and cute. Gay male wedding in England. Registrar stands at front of the ceremony before starting the vows and for some inexplicable reason says, "Get your rings ready, boys." Cue 30 gays bursting out in uncontrollable laughter, and the older family members at the front looking around confused and/or disapprovingly. Roller skate wedding. Bride fell down and opened a gusher on her head. They finished the ceremony and took her to the hospital. She ended up needing emergency surgery to drain fluid buildup in her head and ended up having to relearn how to walk. The adverse effects were from the surgery that saved her life, not the accident itself. Sometimes to save someone, you gotta F some shit up. Best, bride and groom both happy crying at the altar. Worst, another man proposing to his girlfriend during the reception. Never seen but heard about, someone else proposing to the bride during the ceremony. I've told this story before, but it definitely fits. My friend's dad had just died of cancer after fighting for a few years, and me and another friend went to funeral to pay our respects and be there for the family. We got there a little early and met up with my friend, his girlfriend, and his brother in the church's entryway. There was a wedding finishing up in there, so we had to wait and we just stood there waiting to set things up. The wedding finally lets out and we see the guests rolling out, followed by the wedding party. All of the bridesmaids and groomsmen were dressed in full Adidas tracksuits and sneakers. Then the bride and groom make their appearance and she is wearing a pink wedding dress with a pair of Adidas sneakers and a track jacket over the dress. The groom is wearing a white Adidas tracksuit with a matching hat like this one. They both walk out hand in hand doing the sea walk dance and trying to hand us these party poppers, which we politely declined. I think they saw the memorial posters and realized that we were there for a funeral because they stopped dancing, straightened up, and hurried outside. I looked at my friend and we couldn't help but laugh at the situation. Those people were doing their thing and having fun, and it certainly lightened the mood of a very sad day, which is what his dad would have wanted. The bride and groom are at the altar. The minister is speaking, saying something to the effect of, "We are here in the presence of friends and family who are all here to give this union their blessing." To which the groom's mother stands up and says, "No, not everyone, I do not give this my blessing." It was both horrible and kind of hilarious. When I was a child, my cousin and I cut my aunt's wedding cake while everyone was out of the room. We thought we were helping. I'd feel bad. She ended up divorcing the dude and her current husband is awesome. Edit. I totally get where a lot of you are coming from. I think I should clarify something. My aunt, who I love dearly, was 18 when she got married. I can only assume that an 18-year-old would be idealistic and heartbroken that two kids cut her cake on what should be the most important day of her 18-year-old life. She and I both laugh about it now. I was a bad kid who has done much worse than cut someone's cake at a wedding, So I'm sure that also had something to do with it. My wife was recently a bridesmaid for her friend who she hadn't really seen in a few years. It was actually a nice wedding and the reception was also pretty nice. Unfortunately, the groomsman my wife was paired with was under the impression that she was going to go home with him after the wedding. Me and my wife have been together for almost 20 years. And some rando she met 1 or 2 times is going to sweep her off her feet when her husband and kid are in the same room?